Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today on the 29th Parliamentary Session of the World Teen Parliament. Thank you so much and a very warm welcome to all the guests for today and the amazing teen MPs and influencers from all across the world who have been elected to the World Teen Parliament in its third edition. Before we start this session, during the year of 2022, we started something called the World Teen Parliament, which is the world's first and the only elected parliament of teenagers as of now, as we know it till now. Most importantly, this is an opportunity for teenagers across the world to know about how democracies work, experience the function of a democracy, experience democratic decision-making, understand sociocracy, and most importantly, get into the shoes of policymakers and understand that when we criticize politicians, what are those politicians really going through and what are the policy makers really going through? So thank you so much once again for joining us today. This is the 29th Parliamentary Session. Before we start the session, there is some good news for all of you, for all the teenagers who might have been tuned in on this session. So as you can see, the World Teen Parliament is celebrating its third year or the third World Teen Parliament. And this year, we are announcing the World Teen Awards, which is a global non-profit initiative of the Blub World Foundation, which is supported by the World Teen Parliament. Every year, the World Teen Parliament will be selecting some teenagers to financially support them through World Teen Awards on the basis of any inspiring work that they might be doing in different fields that we have mentioned. You all can go on blubworld.com/World Teen Awards and check out the different award categories that are there. Most importantly, this award is worth INR 75,000 rupees. So if you win the award, you get a cash award of INR 75,000, which you can use for your higher education, for your work that you're already doing for greater impact. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This is the 29th Parliamentary Session. Before we start this session, once again, some clear tips for all the teen MPs and influencers who have joined us. While you're asking your question, make sure that the speaker is able to clearly understand your question. If the speaker is not able to understand, make sure that you repeat yourself clearly and you're audible. Make sure that you have good light on your face when you're asking that question. So we'll now be starting the 29th Parliamentary Session of the World Teen Parliament. This year as well, like every year, the World Teen Parliament opens up elections where teenagers give ideas for world improvement. And on the basis of the votes that people give them, the top 100 teens become the members of parliament. So today, like every month on the third Saturday, the World Teen Parliament does something called a parliamentary session, where we invite sitting policy makers from different parts of the world to share their experience with you, and most importantly, interact with you, answer your queries and answer your questions about policy making, about how governments and parliaments and countries across the world work. So let me invite our speaker for today, a very warm welcome to, for the opening address, a very warm welcome to Mr. Darren Bergman, who's the Deputy Shadow Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition from South Africa, Parliament of South Africa and Democratic Alliance, Johannesburg, Gauteng, South Africa. A very warm welcome, sir. Over to you for the opening address and to initiate the 29th Parliamentary Session of the World Teen Parliament.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And it's nice to see so many talented people on the screen. So warm greeting from South Africa, and look forward to interacting with you, look forward to the questions as well. Just a brief introduction as to where I come from and what got me involved in politics. I started by giving a speech at school. I left my aeroplanes at home. I wanted to be a pilot. So I had a 5 Rand telephone card and it had Nelson Mandela's face on it. And I spoke to my English teacher about Nelson Mandela for about 5 minutes. Unfortunately, back then, I didn't really know enough about Nelson Mandela and I didn't know enough about the struggle, but it was 1994 and it was on the eve of our first democratic elections. And I managed to speak for 5 minutes convincingly about President Nelson Mandela. And for that, my English teacher made me read more and more books about politics. And that's what got me involved in politics. Since then, I joined the youth in what was then known as the Democratic Party. And for me, it was always about fighting injustices where injustices would occur. And it was then when I learned a lot more about Parliament, about what the atrocities of apartheid. Unfortunately, around that time was also when Zimbabwe was happening, and we were seeing what was taking place in Zimbabwe when people were coming from Zimbabwe to South Africa. And as a teen, my party was hoping as a leader of the youth brigade that I would help the party to create publicity around the struggle that Zimbabweans were facing in their country and the fact that they had to come to South Africa. So we had some protest marches, we marched to the embassy, and as an activist, you realize that politics is not a career, it's a vocation. So you don't choose politics. I think politics chooses you. It's something that you feel, you wake up feeling. It's something that you know that you want to fight the injustices. And what happened to me was I became a councillor. I was one of the youngest councillors in Johannesburg at the age of 23. And I was the safety spokesperson. And I would talk about things like safety because that was my main care. But then I started talking about ambulances. And the paramedics said to me, but why don't you talk about us, but you've never been in an ambulance, you've never treated an ambulance, so what makes you qualified to talk about us? And my party leader, before my current leader, was someone that said you should always go see for yourself. And what I did was I went one night. They said they'll take me out on the ambulance for 4 hours. And those 4 hours turned into the whole night. And that whole night became 2 years. So I volunteered for 2 years on an ambulance because, again, as an activist, you always want to help people and you always want to make a difference. And on the ambulance was where you could make a difference. We then realized with the police that with the youth, if for every 2 people that you put in the call center, and in the call center, they were manning the call center with policemen, and we had a shortage of policemen. So we could put people that just had to answer phones. For every 2 times that we put in students that could answer the phone, they could put it out another police vehicle with 2 policemen on the road. And these were direct differences that we were making to people's lives. And, it's also like a drug. It kind of bites you because you feel better. Every time you're saving a life or every time you're helping someone, something inside you just it opens you up. You feel better and you feel better. So these are the kind of things that were happening. Then in 2011, 10 years down the line or 11 years down the line, I ran in an area as a ward councillor that was run by government, by the ruling party, which is known as the ANC. I ran in an area which was predominantly run by the ANC, that they had a lot of ANC voters. And I won in that area. I actually surprised everyone because they never thought that a white person could actually win in that area. And I won in that area. And one of the reasons they said that I'd won it was because I was there to listen to people and I was there to actually hear what the people were saying and not to tell the people what was wrong with them, but to actually hear what was wrong with them. So that started 4 years of an interesting story because you've got 15,000 people that all say they voted for you, but obviously they can't have voted for you if you only won by about 50 votes. But you've also got people there that they think the ruling party tell them that you're there as a white man, you're going to bring back apartheid. And they tell you that this white man is going to, he's not going to give service to certain areas and he's only going to give service to other areas. And that's not true. But in the first 3 weeks, there was no water in the whole area. But in my area, they had 300 people marching and burning tires because there was no water. So I went there and I said, well, I'll stay with you until the water comes back. And they said, no, you will bring the water back. And I said, but I can't. I mean, there's no water in the whole of Alexandria. I can't bring the water back. And they said, well, until the water comes back, you're not going anywhere. And if the water doesn't come back within 4 hours, we're going to put a burning tire around your neck. And, you know, that's when you learn that you've got 15,000 people that are your bosses, and they know your job description because they tell you what your job description is. And I said to them that I'll stay there, and that if they don't have water, I won't have water. And when the pump arrived eventually with water, they made me have the first sip, and I had the first sip, and then I went to Amandla, and they all went to Amandla, and then they told me that I'd always be welcome in their neighborhood. But every time was a struggle. Every time was you know, every time was a different thing. And one day the ruling party cut the power in the area, and how I know it was the ruling party was because they never stole the cables, and they cut the power right above the wire. But it was just before Christmas, and people had just bought groceries. Their hard-earned money had just bought groceries, and they told people in this poor area that it was this white man that gone and cut the white man is obviously doesn't care, and the white man is not going to give them electricity. So what I said to them was, we're going to stand guard. And I made it clear to everyone that I can't help them if anything happens. If we see someone else cutting the wire again, I can't protect them. And if they're working for another party, I can't protect them. So that never happened again. And each time we had to be one step ahead. Each time you had to be clever and cleverer. So what I'm saying is that when it comes to helping people, sometimes you're helping people that they don't like you at first. They don't know why they need your help. They don't realize they need your help. And you persevere and you struggle. And then by carrying on, they see that you care. By the time I became an MP, the very same people that wanted to put a tire around my neck didn't want me to leave. They wanted me to still be a councillor. When I became an MP, they gave me the sports portfolio. And I said to my leaders, I said, I'll take sports and I'll try and make a difference to sports, but I really should be in international relations because I really want conflict. I really believe in conflict. So what I'd do is I'd sit in the international relations portfolios and sit as an observer or an alternate. But I actually got my master's in sports transformation because, again, I believed that we could do something in transformation. What happened was during COVID, though, was that all the airports got locked. And as you know, in South Africa, it was happened all over the world. But there were people from South Africa that were stranded all over the world with no medicine, no money, and no roof over their heads. Some of our South Africans were left in airports by themselves. Even the security guards had left the airports. There were South Africans. There were people that were in South Africa that were trapped. And we started a group called Home Away from Home. And we decided that what we would do is we would try and work with government to rescue South Africans that were stranded all over the world, because people were coming to us and saying that the government is not listening to us, but we're stuck. Some of us are stuck right outside your border. We're right here. We're only 20 kilometers away, and yet they won't let us back in. All we want to do is get to our house. And we don't have food anymore. We don't have money anymore, but we can't get back to our house. And I started writing to my Minister of International Relations. I started speaking to our DIRCO. And eventually we got the cooperation. And in the end, we managed to save 25,000 lives. Even afterwards in quarantine, there were people that wanted to commit suicide because our quarantine was very strict. And we had a service that would still help them by going to talk to them or going to assist them to stop them from standing on the ledge. So I see that my time is running out, but I just wanted to say that these are the kind of things that you never stop being an activist, regardless of whether you're being paid, regardless of if you're a politician, and you never, doesn't matter what side of the party, which party you belong to, putting your people first, whichever they are, whoever they are, is important. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Darren, for this amazing start to the parliamentary session. I think it's really amazing to know that when most of the people look at policymakers, they don't look at them as humans. They look at them as some aliens who have a lot of power and who can decide things for them. And it's really interesting to know the human side of the people who are really making policies and what kind of risks that they themselves have taken or the kind of dangers that they themselves have gone through to be at a place where they're right now. So before we go into the questions of the teenagers, there's a question of my own that I have for you, that most of the times when, a policymaker or an individual faces a very risky situation, the outcome is typically that the individual becomes vindictive. They always try to seek some sort of a revenge from the people who might have, pulled something wrong against you, or whether it's, with the opposing party, or it gets really difficult to support the people that you as an individual have a perception that they are not your voters. These are not the people who have voted for you. So what do you do to typically, do away with this dilemma? And how do you pacify yourself that, okay, this is something that I don't have to do or I should not get involved into? Because we see a lot of vindictive politics happening across countries. And what we have seen is that systems cannot control it. Only individuals with their own sensitization can do it. So what are the tactics or techniques that you adopt so that this does not happen with you? Over to you, sir.
I was muted for a while. Very good question. I must tell you that it's a struggle because, I think it starts in the ambulance. I think it's a good lesson there. We in South Africa, we've got a high crime rate. And if you're a paramedic, sometimes you're at a crime scene and you've got to choose between the robber, the victim, or the suspect. But the suspect has medical aid by the state. You don't have a choice. You have to treat both. You have to give them the best level of care because that's what you signed up for. And you've got to do it without fear or favor. You've got to give them your best care, and that's basic human rights. It's the same with when it comes to policy. In conflict, I've seen it often. What puts people apart is often that if you look at the warring factions, that they're so similar. There might only be 2 or 3 things that differentiate them. Now, I always look at, my starting point is always to look at what are the positives, what are the opportunities. If you look at the positives and the opportunities, that's probably the first starting point for any negotiations or for motivating someone to start with policy. Second of all, know that whatever you're doing is for the greater good. It's not for yourself. It's not for, if you make happier people, or if you make better people, or you make more productive people or wealthier people, you're making you're making a more productive society. You're making a society that will be more happier. You're making a society that won't be angry. They won't want to protest. They won't want, and this is the kind of thing that if you keep a selfless mind about it, and you don't get personal about it. Often I've had it where you've saved someone or you've helped someone, and you don't realize that, or that person doesn't realize it was actually you because you don't say it was you. It's two or three degrees away from that person, and they're talking badly about your party or they're talking badly about you. Meanwhile, it was actually you that saved them. You just have to, it's water off a duck's back in the end.
The reason I actually asked this question was because most of, the World Teen Parliament is composed of teenagers. And teenagers are at that age where that emotion is on the rage. That if something bad has happened to me, I need to, get back at people or get back at all the people around me. So what is a small little lesson that they can take away from you? Because when you're sitting in a risk of people putting a burning tire on your head, and you still think well of those people and again go back to them and keep serving them. So what is that emotion? How do you, keep it alive and active?
Number one is control your emotions. That's the most important thing you can do as a teenager. I was an angry teenager. And when I learned to control my emotions, I realized that I was only hurting myself. I realized hate and anger are two emotions that hurt yourself. They're two weapons. They like walking around with a loaded gun that you shoot yourself with these loaded guns. If you forgive and you forget, those are the two gifts that you give yourself. So if you can control your emotions in politics, and you make yourself very hard to get angry, people themselves become frustrated, and they frustrate themselves by trying to make you angry. It hurts them. It doesn't hurt you. It makes them frustrated, not you. So the first thing as a teen was learning to control my emotions. And I think that was the best lesson, because people couldn't get to you. When you realized that when people started getting angry, you realized they were hurting themselves. You realized they were working themselves up. They were wasting their own energy. They were expending their own energy. And I was saying, tomorrow will be a next day, or next week will be another week. You always reset yourself and know that next week's another week. So always control your emotions. Anger in politics is a no-no. A lot of politicians, you'll see it takes a lot for them to start getting angry in politics. And this thing of revenge, jealousy, hatred, those things are those are having weapons in your own body. Those are like having the knife in you. It's having a gun pointed at your own gun pointing at you. You only hurt yourself. The less you have of that in politics, the happier you'll be in politics. Have a short memory in politics is probably the best advice I can give you.
I think that's a very important takeaway for all the teenagers, that, don't hold things onto yourselves. Don't let things go personal. And whatever wrong emotions you might have, you'll only be hurting yourselves. So at least start by cleaning yourself up first.
The most powerful thing is forgiveness. You must try it, because when you forgive someone, they carry your anger now because you've forgiven them. And you're the bigger person. And I'm not preaching it. I'm just saying you try it yourself. When you forgive someone, they don't know what to do, because now they've got to carry that. They're either carrying a burden, or you've released your own burden.
You're being selfish by by forgiving others. It keeps you happy, and the burden goes to the other individual. So, let's now move on to the questions from the teenagers. The first question comes from Vinayak Gupta. Vinayak, please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Namaste, sir. I'm Vinayak Gupta. I'm teen member of Parliament of 3rd WTB, Vinayak Gupta of 10th class of Bhavan Vidyalaya, Panchkula, Haryana, India. Today my question to you is, as the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, how you manage the demands made by various industrialists on new policies, for example, relaxation in policies, and what teens can learn from it, which could they incorporate in their lives?
Very good question. I must say that I'm the shadow minister. So my real minister is what we call a communist, and he's in charge of a free market. So it's a contradiction in itself. You have a communist in charge of a free market. That doesn't work. As a teen, university begins at school. You're learning things at school that you don't realize whether you need them or not. The only way you'll know what you need is when you run your life like a business. So you become an entrepreneur by running your life like a business. What we as a government have to do is create an environment for you as an entrepreneur not to be caught up by red tape. We must encourage people to be able to run their lives and to run themselves as a business. So if you want to trade, we should make it easier for you to trade. If you want to learn about skills, or you want to learn what's out there, we should make it easier. I didn't know what I wanted to do. As I told you, by mistake, I said a speech. Your schools don't necessarily prepare you for the job that you're best for. And you don't necessarily realize until a later stage what you want to do. But in terms of hunger, in terms of supply and demand, the best way to do this is to have experience. So the best thing that a school can do, or the best thing that a government can do, is to try and introduce learnership as quickly as possible into the program, where you're working, where teens, and not necessarily teens in university or teens in the curriculum just pre-matric, are working with business to shadow and see what is out there, and to get an understanding before they go study their whole 7 years and decide 7 years later that they studied the wrong thing. Is to study what they believe or follow their dream. What we need to do as a government is make it easier for you to do so. What we need to do as a government is government should enable contracts. Government should enable the platform for trade. Government should enable a platform for industry. We shouldn't be taking and taking. We should be giving and giving.
Yes, sir. You mean that we should create a learning environment for everybody to succeed in the life, and everybody should be profitable from that environment.
Correct. Education is important. I think a lot of the time people say they're educated because they went through school. But how do they know they were educated? Just because they went through school and just because they got a mark from school, that's not an education. Education is when you can read for understanding. Education is when you know that you came out of school wanting to do something. A lot of adults, there's a famous quote that says, adults ask children what they want to be when they grow up because adults have run out of ideas of what they want to be when they grow up. And I think it really shows you in the economy that we have right now that the big business is running out of big business. The leaders of our big business are taking home huge salaries and commanding huge salaries, while the people on the ground level are taking home minimum pay. The gap, the Gini coefficient between the person on the ground and the person at the top is getting wider and wider. And why that is happening is because the world is demanding more from big business and is not taking enough from small business and is not taking enough from the entrepreneur. And I think if it was spread widely, so where you see a success like that is in London. London used to have communities built around communities. So you would buy from your local deli, you'd buy from your local clothes shop, your local newsstand, and you'd buy from your local pharmacy. And that community supported those communities in that block. You didn't see these big shopping centers. You didn't see these big conglomerates. It was all a community-driven society. That's how it worked for over 400 years in London. Now, all of a sudden, with these big malls coming in, then Boots can now sell medicine, Boots can now sell cosmetics, Boots can now sell food, Boots can sell everything. What's in it for the little person? Where's the business in the little person's business plan? So if we built smart cities, if we had where the supply and the demand was given into your community. So if Vinayak wanted to sell food or be a restaurant in his community, he becomes the restaurateur, and that community supports the restaurateur. If Jude wants to be the newsstand seller, he's the newsstand seller. People support him as the newsstand seller. If Ayesha wants to be the local dressmaker, everyone comes to Ayesha for a dress for the dresses. That's how you grow business, and that's how you grow a community.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for
Thank
my
you.
query.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Aditya Rajesh. Aditya, please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask your question.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Aditya Rajesh, the UAE. Mr. Bergman, considering your significant role in both national and international politics, how do you envision the role of international cooperation and liberal democratic values evolving in addressing future global crises? And what unique insights from your career do you believe will be most critical in shaping this vision itself?
I love these questions. I could be here all day. I want to tell you that I don't think politicians have done enough. I think politicians just talk. if you want my honest opinion. And I think politicians are part of the problem. So you're in a country that has signed a peace deal of late. It's the most successful peace deals that are signed are done by businessmen, not by politicians. The politicians go for workshops. They go for talk shops, sorry. They don't go for workshops. They go to talk shops. So before COVID hit, we used to spend billions upon billions on conferences. These lovely conferences, you get nice conference bags, you get nice conference pens, you get nice conference books. But when it comes to taking home something of an idea, like the questions that you're asking, and coming home with something concrete from what you're getting from a program like, yeah, this program is already offering you an award for coming up with a great idea. This is a great initiative. You walk away from a talk shop. I used to go to all these talk shops that were going to prepare for these big diseases, that were going to prepare for the day when an epidemic hit the world. But what happened when COVID hit? Everyone that had prepared for everything had forgotten what they prepared for, and they didn't stay global. Everyone became internal. They stayed domestic. So what the problem is vice versa, is we were the wrong way around. We do need to become global, but we don't have the body to be global at this stage, because with the UN, I belong to an organization called the Democracy Without Borders, because we want to change the UN. We believe the UN doesn't have enough teeth. We believe that the UN is a bit too political and not enough teeth. And then we go to conferences. So the UN has got its own votes. And then when it says that someone's doing wrong or someone's doing right, it never does anything. And then when people are running certain committees and they talk, let's say they're talking about human rights, but they're running the committee, they're not practicing human rights in their own country. So we've got problems within the UN that need to be addressed. Then you go to these conferences and you talk to certain countries, and they come into the country and they say that you'll hear, like, I can give Africa as an example. In my continent, people are dying of hunger. They're dying because they don't have jobs. But then you have people from Europe coming to our country, to our continent, and at our conference, they'll say, but the air quality is bad and we don't look after our animals. So now it's giving the connotation that people from Europe care more about our animals than they do about our people. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying that obviously the environment is an important aspect of the world climate is an important aspect of our problems. But when you're talking at a conference and people are telling you their deepest, darkest fears, that they're hungry, that they don't have jobs, and you're criticizing their air quality and you're criticizing the way they treat their animals, you're cross-communicating. You're not communicating on the same wavelength at that conference. That conference is going to walk away with not the same. You're not going to walk away with concrete. You're not going to walk away with concrete proposals. So where's the best forum to get something concrete started? And there's that saying that charity begins from home. So something like this, where you start within us, where you start with commonality, number one, but number two is where you can start domestically. So I'm in SADC, which is all the Southern African countries. I'm an executive member, even though I belong to an opposition party. I was one of the only opposition party members on the executive. Regional politics is powerful. Regional politics is where the power lies, not within UN, not within workshops and talk shops, but in regional politics. So if you can get to your region, and if you can encourage youth participation in your region, and you can encourage more workshops and less talk shops in your region, that's where the difference will be made.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful answer.
Thank you.
I think when you say that the real power lies in the regional politics, that is something that every future politician should understand, that the power really is, stored away in the regional politics, but people don't realize the potential of it and they don't use it that way. They, typically get swayed by the talk shows and the talk shops rather. So the next question comes from Ayesha Rafath. Ayesha, over to you. Please unmute yourself, introduce and ask your question.
Good evening, sir. I am Ayesha Rafath, IMP of 3rd World Teen Parliament from MS Education Academy, Hyderabad, Telangana, India. So my question to you is that how do you as a Democratic Alliance intend to tackle issues related to trade barriers and improve South Africa's competitiveness on the global stage?
Sure. Excellent. Unfortunately, South Africa hasn't done itself favors at all. The one thing that South Africa does well is that it's got friends all over the world. And that was from Tsatsi Nelson Mandela, that they shared a stage with as many countries in the world. Unfortunately, internally, domestically, I don't think we've done enough to show countries that we're open for business. So we've got a lot of red tape, number one. Corruption, number two, doesn't tend itself for us to be good trade partners. We're suffering from what's called load shedding. Now, what's interesting is load shedding has been crippling our businesses up until this year. All of a sudden this year, in the election year, load shedding has stopped. No one can answer why load shedding has stopped, but all of a sudden load shedding has stopped. But load shedding had a huge impact on trade because a lot of multinational companies said that they can't invest in a country that cannot keep the lights on. We're now suffering from what's called water shedding as well, where some cities or towns don't have water in their, they don't get water through their pipes. So what they do is they have to actually manually fetch water, and they've been doing that for months, and they neglect it because that doesn't get a mention. So I think domestically we need to fix ourselves up at home first. We need to make sure that we clean up corruption. We need to make sure that we stop the load shedding, we stop the water shedding, and then we need to then use our relationships with all countries all over the world and open up ourselves for trade, better trade. It's no use you bring your goods to South Africa, but you can't park the ship in our bay because it takes you 3 months to get the ship offloaded in our bay. That doesn't help you. So we need to fix ourselves up first.
I have a question of my own at this point. Since you mentioned that South Africa was facing load shedding and a lot of industries were having this complaint, but all of a sudden when the election year came, that load shedding just went away. So most of these, such a scenario happens in a lot of countries, that during the election year, all of a sudden just problems just go away. And there's nobody who can persistently ask this question because of the press freedom index that keeps falling in most of the countries. So what are the measures that you are currently taking in South Africa so that this does not happen? Or is it something that you have already solved, or is it still a challenge within your country?
Look, we face some strange things in South Africa. All of a sudden, after the RCJ court case, the government party was going to be, the sheriff was visiting their offices to confiscate furniture and posters, and they had no money. All of a sudden, after the court case, they had money all over. They could put up posters. They put up the most expensive posters. They're now able to, they can now fill up stadiums, bus people to their stadiums. And as I say, load shedding is now a thing of the past at the moment. What we're saying, luckily press freedom at this stage, I'd like to say we're free, but the national broadcaster has been wrapped over the knuckles by the president because of their lack of positive coverage to the ruling party. I'd like to say we're free, but our advert has been banned by the national broadcaster. But I think we still enjoy a relatively free broadcaster compared to everywhere else. What's going to happen is post the elections, we have been questioning the load shedding. We have been able to question the load shedding. We have been able to question everything, not necessarily get the answers, but we have been able to at least question it. I think after the elections, you will see that they've been trying to hold all the infrastructure up with sellotape or with plasters, and that you'll probably see that it all comes crashing back straight after the elections, that it will still be bad after the elections. So unfortunately, it's almost like Cinderella at the prom, that at 12 o'clock at midnight after the elections, we'll turn back into our pumpkin and we'll get the old dress and all the rats and mice, unfortunately.
I think that we should all call it the election Cinderella effect, because that's something a lot of countries and a lot of citizens face across the world.
Correct.
The next question comes from Aindri Basu. Aindri, over to you. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. And introduce yourself, please.
Greetings of the day, sir. I'm Aindri Basu from Douglas Memorial Higher Secondary School. I'm a student of class 12. I repeat my question. What are the future challenges you foresee for the South Africa in global trade environment, and how does it align to India's outlook?
I think, as you know, or I hope you know, that we have an agreement with India, which was couched in BRICS. I've never believed that South Africa was an equal partner in BRICS. But I do believe that the most neutral partner in BRICS is India. If you look at China and you look at Russia, I believe that India and South Africa in a South-South cooperation had a lot more in common and had a lot more that they should be trading and they should be doing together. I don't believe we've done enough in terms of our relationship. There's a beautiful corridor between KZN and India with regards to tourism, trade, and I really believe that hasn't been utilized enough. And I think that we need to utilize that more. I think that we've done a lot to build industrial zones in KZN, and KZN is really just one flight away from India. It's one quick flight, and it's really, I think that the opportunities between BRICS and South Africa and India lie between KZN and India. And I think if we were in power after this elections, which could be, we would definitely make it, I would definitely make that important for us, a priority.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
The next question comes from Thaung Sandra Khin. Thaung, please introduce yourself and then ask the question.
Okay, so good afternoon, Mr. Darren Bergman. I'm Thaung Sandra Khin from Safewell International School. My question to you is, how does South Africa promote gender inclusivity in trade and industry?
I think South Africa that's the one thing they do excel in quite honestly, in merit, without pushing it and without manufacturing it. I think gender equality is something that they've strived for. I think that they've done very well in. I think the only problem where we're lacking in gender equality is on gender-based violence. And we've had a lot of government campaigns around gender-based violence. So when it comes to business and trade and industry, you'll find that we've got quite a lot of lady CEOs. We've got quite a lot of women in high positions and on merits. It's not window dressing. They're not trying to do it because to fill a quota or anything. Women in South Africa get where they deserve. They're in the positions that they deserve, and they do very well. From the public protector to the Premier of the Western Cape. What we haven't seen yet, of course, is a female president of our country. But in trade and industry, there's definitely been some very good, strong, capable female leaders, and it shouldn't be unexpected. I mean, I think it is to be expected, and it is encouraged, and I think that's the one place where we do excel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you've answered that there is a lot of meritocracy that's in place when you talk of the female representation in the industry. The next question comes from Johan Thomas. Johan, over to you. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening, Mr. Darren. My name is Johan. I study in class 10 and I live in the UAE. My question to you is, what are some common trade barriers faced by industries, and how does the government address them and effectively solve such trade barriers?
Look, I think our trade barrier has to be the cost of the dollar to South Africa. To give you an idea now, it's sitting nearly at 20 Rand to the dollar. So if a Big Mac in South Africa costs nearly 20, I think it's about nearly 50 Rand for a meal, a McDonald's meal. So 50 Rand is $2, it's just over $2 in South Africa. That's our biggest challenge on importing, is the expense of the dollar. We also have a huge problem with our logistics and our infrastructure, and that's a problem in Africa. So to get a container from the UAE shipped to Kenya or South Africa could cost us $600 just to ship the container. But when it gets from the port to ship it anywhere else in any country on road, to drive it anywhere to any other country, costs $1,600. So it's nearly triple the amount to just drive it even to your neighbor, to your neighboring country. It's more expensive just to go to your neighboring country than it is to bring the container from the UAE down to KZN or down to Kenya. So these are some of the challenges. And then, as I said, is if you in our ports at certain times, we have mechanical logistical problems in the ports being stuck, backlogs, processing backlogs, corruption. Corruption is a big problem, especially if you're trading within Africa. There's big problems in the sense that if you're trying to cross the border, you cross one border and you hope that that border is not corrupt, and you cross into the next border and you hope that that border is not corrupt. The chances of both borders not being corrupt are very slim, though. So there's there's definitely you paying extra taxes, so to speak, on that, or duties on that. I think with us, we're lucky with BRICS and obviously preferential trade agreements, but we don't necessarily have good trade agreements with everyone. And I think that's another barrier to trade, is the trade tariffs. Because of the Rand dollar, is I suppose South Africa relies on countries giving us better trade tariffs for us to trade.
Thank you, sir.
So I must just make mention that we are one of the wealthiest countries in resources. We've got natural resources, but we don't manufacture. So a whole lot of countries take our resources to their country, manufacture, and then sell it back to us at 5 times the cost of what we could have done it if we manufactured. Thank you.
I think you very clearly drew a picture of how corruption could typically be such a big crippling, factor when we look at countries. Even so, everyone within the call can understand that individuals really create a nation. So if corruption lies there in an individual, even a nation can get crippled so easily. So this is something that every teenager must understand, that as an individual, what are you doing? Because that's where your country really starts. And how are you looking at your regional politics around you? Because that's what Mr. Darren also said, that the real power is within that regional politics. So you might, be, super happy with the flamboyancy of a global forum or a global action, but always be, always try to stick towards the regional issues and acting locally so that you can really create some impact and, enjoy some power. So let's take the next question that comes from Jude Joe. Jude, over to you. Please unmute yourself, introduce and ask your question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jude Joe, studying in class 10 at our own English High School, Sharjah. My question to you is, how to promote sustainability in industrial practices and what lessons can be learned to implement more sustainable practices?
That's a very good question. I think once you get the system going, it should grow itself, and that should sustain itself. Government's job is to be enabling. So government's job is to just keep the processes going. And I think the more that government grows, the more government must spend. So government should be able to use procurement to keep the economy going or to keep the economy enabled. The business environment itself should be free. So it should rely on supply and demand. And as I say, that's where the less red tape, the better. We have one of the best revenue services, collect tax, and we use that tax to improve on our using that for basic services. Unfortunately for us, we don't use it on basic services. We use it on grants. It goes to the wrong things because we have a high unemployment rate. We should have a lower unemployment rates and be able to use their taxes on schools, use their taxes on infrastructure, and use it on the civil service. But unfortunately, we don't. So if we had all that, if we had it running, if government was spending on the right things, industry would increase. They would be getting contracts and tenders, and they would be enabling themselves through a free market.
Thank you, sir.
We still have a big list of questions that are there for you, but we're nearly at the end of the session. The time is coming to an end. So before the session concludes, I would like to actually ask you a question that had been submitted by an MP. Dhania KH had submitted this question, and you already shared with us that how did your journey of politics really start from you interacting about Nelson Mandela to your English teacher. So how do you think your educational journey really impacted your development as a politician or as a policymaker? And what were those any of those critical moments while you were going through your education or your higher education that really made you the kind of individual that you are today?
Well, it's a very good question in the sense that my real education never came from school, and I don't want to discourage anyone from learning and the importance of education. What I want to encourage people is to do more. I never took advantage of school. I never took advantage of what school offered me, and that's university included. I did a business degree, and what I would do is I would just take any subject, and I'd never study for the subject. I'd just take it, and I took the long way around because I was more interested in politics and I was more interested in living life. So I just, whatever I failed, I'd take another subject. And only when I dated a doctor and the father wouldn't allow me to date his daughter because I didn't have a degree, did I decide to finish my degree. My real education came from life. It came from being in politics. It came from learning what it was to go into communities. So when you got a child that's nearly drowned in Zürich, and you got to defend that community, or when you got people that have called you out of bed, where the doctor has told you you're not allowed to leave bed, but the community calls you out of bed because their houses have been hit by hail, and you tell them that you can't do anything because it's hail, and you're not going to be able to fix the house, but they want you there because you're the community leader. You go there at night just to see the house, but you see their faces when you arrive. That's education, because you get to see how everyone lives. Empathy, EQ, IQ, these are things that a school can't teach you. You teach yourself EQ and IQ by experiencing life, by understanding life, by going to see what it is from the other side. So people say to me, you talk about Russia, you talk about Morocco, you talk about Israel, Palestine. How do you do it? Why do you do it? Well, I've been on both sides. I've been to Western Sahara, I've been to Morocco, I've been to Gaza, I've been to Israel. I can do this because you have to go see for yourself. You cannot take what the magazines tell you. You cannot take what the newspapers tell you. The newspapers or the media are going to tell you what the advertisers want you to tell them. You have to research it from academic papers yourself. That's where the education comes in. So now my friends that have gone through the education, I go to them and I say, guys, you're a lawyer, but I make the law. I make the legislation. You're a lawyer, but my friends that love sports, they love the IPL. I love the IPL. But who's the one that has spoken to the Faf du Plessis? Who's the ones that have spoken to the Siya Kolisi's of this world? It's me, because I've written the book on transformation. So life experience is what gives you your education, by experiencing life, not being scared to experiencing it, by going out, by getting on that ambulance to feel what it's like to work on an ambulance, by getting in that police car to feel what it's like to work on that police car. That's where the real education came along. But then what happened was I decided to get my master's. And when I got my master's, I did realize that a little bit of knowledge could be dangerous. You know, when you learn a lot, when you do your master's, and this is what the transformation paper was all about, I realized what I didn't know. And when you start researching properly, a friend used to tease me. She said that I always say that I research something, or I do something because I say I research it because I've read about it and I read about it and I read about it. But when you, in your master's, when you have to research and you have to come up with a thesis, that's when I realized what I didn't know. And that's when the real regret set in, is that I could have been a doctor. And I wasted so much time and I wasted so much valuable effort by not going through the educational route. So I don't regret the education I've got of life, but I do regret not getting an education, a stable education. So I did get my master's, and I'm happy I got my master's, but I got my master's at 40 odd years old, when I could have got my master's at 20, and I should have got it at 20, because then I would have carried on being a student, although I'm a student of life forever.
Thank you so much, Mr. Darren. That is an amazing thought to actually part with. And to conclude the 29th Parliamentary Session, I think every teenager here can understand that the real teacher lies within you. As a teenager, you have to understand that how do you become, or how do you teach yourself? How do you get into research? And most importantly, you are currently in a situation where you have that educational route in hand. You have that educational route in hand, which can give you the right kind of support when you're going to take real life decisions. And most importantly, let life be someone who teaches you more than just perceptions, more than just books, more than just what you're reading. Let life be an active player in your education. Thank you so much, Mr. Darren, for taking out the time and being here with us on the 29th Parliamentary Session of the World Teen Parliament. Thank you so much, all the teenagers. I hope you have an amazing evening ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Namaste.